In this lesson, we are looking at how to answer a language question. So, how does the writer use language to describe? How does the writer use language to interest, etc.? Language. So, if we look at a language question, now this question is taken from an AQA paper. However, all the exam boards ask for language. How do writers show? How do writers show things? They use language and they use structure. If you want to know about structure, there's other uploads. Please check my channel, like, subscribe. There are plenty of videos being uploaded daily on different aspects. If there's anything you need to know or request, please send me a message and I will upload PowerPoints videos for you too. So this one, language, this is the AQA one. So it asks, look in detail at this extract. It gives you an extract and it gives you some lines. So lines 16 to 26. How does the writer use language here to describe the, and it will ask you to describe something, recently to describe Rosabelle's journey home, to describe the T-Rex, a variety of things, but the questions are always the same. One of the good things about the English papers are we know the questions, we don't know what the source or the text is, but we can prepare. So we could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features, techniques, and sentence forms. We could change that to should, you choose. The coulds in the exam paper, especially in the AQA exam paper, which we're looking at here, it's help, it's advice. If you're in the exam and you freeze and you forget what you're doing, it does happen in exams, it can happen in exams. It's a little bit of help and advice. So the first thing we need to know is, what is language? Language is words, phrases that people use to express their thoughts and feelings. So if you say, I am really, really, really angry. I am very angry. I'm a little bit angry. The choice of words show our feelings and our thoughts, and the level of our feelings. So the subject terminology. In language, we forget about the obvious, the adjectives, the adverbs, nouns, verbs. We might look at a source or a text and think, there's no metaphors, there's no similes. I know all my language skills are prepared really well. I'm sitting in the exam and I can't find any personification or alliteration. There will be adjectives, there will be adverbs, there will be nouns and pronouns and personal pronouns and collective pronouns. There'll be verbs. So don't ignore the obvious. There are other techniques: alliteration, personification, pathetic fallacy, which is a form of personification, oxymoron, assonance, onomatopoeia. We have a variety. There's a huge list of language techniques. Little bit of revision. Google language techniques. We will find them. By year 10, you will have a good knowledge of a majority of language techniques. So the examiner is looking for, now these are the assessment objectives. There's 3. The use of subject terminology. The writer uses an adjective. The metaphor suggests. So the subject terminology is from the last page. Any use of these words. So in our answer we must use subject terminology. The red. We must use a range of textual detail. You can use one quote, but if you want to get the higher marks, we must use a range of quotes. In other words, more than one quote. And the third objective is to explain, to make a comment. The adjective means, the adjective tells us. We are explaining, we're commenting. For the higher marks, we must analyse the effects of the writer's choice. So explain, comment. To get the higher marks, we analyse. To get the higher marks, we use more than one quote. We use a range of subject terminology. So analyse means to examine carefully. Break it down in order to discover its meaning. So if there's a phrase, if there's a quote, break down the quote. Look at the adjectives, the adverbs. If there is simile, is a personification. Break that quote down and explain what it means to you, what it tells you the writer wants to explain. Now, a technique we can use, many schools have peel, peat, squee. I've heard a variety, I've seen a variety of them. I think the easiest one to remember is point, evidence, explain, expand. Point. The writer uses positive language to show, make your point. The writer uses negative language to show evidence when he says quote. Now we can embed quote, and we can take when he says out. We could say the jewellery shops are described as fairy palaces, as in the 2017 AQA exam paper on Rosabelle, which we'll look at. I've done a sample answer below. Point, evidence, explain. The explain, that's the analyse. This suggests to the reader that. So we are looking at what the examiners are looking for, the assessment objectives, subject terminology, a quote, analysis, point, evidence, explain. So in our explain, this suggests to the reader, where it says suggests, we can add this adjective suggests, this metaphor suggests, this simile suggests, and then expand. If we can do a point, evidence, explain question, you are doing enough to gain the 4 out of 8 marks. If we want to go higher, we need to think about how we analyse in our explain, but we also need to expand. Expand, I think you have 3 choices. So we've done our point, evidence, explain, we expand. Our choices are furthermore, additionally, alternatively. So the first choice, and we only have to do one. Preferably, I think number 1 is the easiest one, the one that I would prefer to do. So we can analyse a different word or phrase from the same quote. So we've used a quote in our evidence. We're still going to stay on that quote, but we're going to look at a different noun or adjective, verb, simile, whatever the subject terminology, whatever the language technique is. Furthermore, the noun also tells us that. Or it might be, you've talked about the noun in your point, evidence, explain, and in your furthermore. Furthermore, the adjective in this quote suggests. Number 2, we could introduce a new quote, another example that backs up the point that we've made. Additionally, this is again conveyed when it says, use the quote, a new quote, which could also imply. So we're adding a second quote in the number 2, or we could go with number 3, alternatively, a different inference or meaning from the original quote. So we stay on the same quote, alternatively, this, whatever this technique is, could also suggest. So if you think you have someone, the boy shouted across the road, you could say he shouted because he's angry. So the word shouted suggests he's angry. Alternatively, he could be concerned about people. He could have seen a car coming and somebody was on the road, so he shouts to tell them. So there's an alternative inference there. An example, so let's put it all together. So we've colour coordinated it. Yellow is the point, the blue is the evidence, the quote, and the green is the explain, and the darker green is the expand. The writer uses positive language to describe Rosabelle's journey home had pleasant views. So my point is, Rosabelle's journey had pleasant views. The question could be, how does the writer use language to describe Rosabelle's journey home? He describes it using positive language, and he says it had pleasant views. Quote, the writer states, the jewellery shops are fairy palaces. This metaphor, so there's my subject terminology, this metaphor, now I'm going to explain, analyse, suggests to the reader that the jewellery shops were like a dream or fantasy, something imaginable and unobtainable for Rosabelle. So I'm telling you what the metaphor suggests and first to me. Furthermore, the metaphor also suggests how the outside is a far better place to be, and emphasises the fact Rosabelle is stuck inside the bus with oozing smell of humanity surrounding her. And then I could go on and analyse the oozing smell of humanity. So we could expand that even further, but for the very basics, point, evidence, explain,